Every time a major economic crisis hits, it feels like we're facing something brand new. But the truth? We're often just replaying a huge debate that's been raging for over 100 years. It's a battle that pits two totally different ideas about the economy against each other. So, what are they? And let's be clear, the shock we all just went through was absolutely historic. I mean, just look at these numbers. In 2020, the world's economy didn't just tap the brakes, it slammed them to the floor. These drops in output for the US, Canada, and the euro area, they were just devastating. We hadn't seen anything like it in generations. So the stakes for getting the response right, well, they couldn't have been higher.
And that really brings us to the core question, right? The one that keeps policymakers and economists up at night. When the economic engine sputters and stalls out this badly, what is the right way to get it running again?
Now, this isn't some new question we just invented. Actually, it's at the very heart of one of the longest-running intellectual battles in modern history. For more than a century, you've had these two powerful, opposing ideas fighting it out, each claiming to know the best way to steer the economic ship through a storm. To really get this, we've got to meet the two heavyweights in the ring, John Maynard Keynes and Friedrich Hayek. And probably the best way to understand their completely different worldviews is with a simple metaphor: the mechanic versus the gardener. All right, so Keynes on the left, he's our mechanic. He saw the economy as this incredibly complex machine, a brilliant machine, sure, but one that can definitely break down. And when it does, he said, a skilled mechanic, that's the government, has to pop the hood, get their hands dirty, and make direct repairs. Then you have Hayek on the right. He saw something completely different. To him, the economy wasn't a machine at all. It was a garden, a complex, living, organic ecosystem that pretty much regulates itself. See, a gardener doesn't force plants to grow. They just create the right conditions and then trust in the garden's natural, spontaneous order. This quote from Keynes, it is the perfect illustration of that mechanic's mindset. He was basically arguing that when things are bad, the simple act of government spending is the tool you need. The goal is to get money flowing, to get people working and buying things again, even if what they're doing seems a little absurd. It's all about grabbing a wrench and directly fixing that big problem of unemployment. Hayek's view could not be more different. He famously called the economy a spontaneous order. He thought it was a system so unbelievably complex. I mean, we're talking billions of individual choices happening all at once, that it was just pure arrogance to think anyone could sit in an office and design it. The gardener's job, in his view, is to be humble, to realize how little we actually know. Okay, so let's fast forward to today. How does the century-old philosophical food fight play out in the real world? Well, the interesting thing is, modern policymakers don't really pick a side. Their toolbox is actually filled with instruments inspired by both the mechanic and the gardener. Let's take something called forward guidance. This is a classic mechanics tool. It's basically the central bank telling everyone, here's our game plan. Here's what we think we're going to do with interest rates. The idea is to manage everyone's expectations to influence how we borrow and spend today. It's all about actively steering that economic machine. It's very hands-on. But then, on the flip side, you've got this idea of the natural rate of interest, which economists call R star. And this is pure gardener stuff. It isn't a rate the central bank sets. It's a rate they try to find. It's this theoretical interest rate where the economy is in a state of perfect balance. By estimating R star, policymakers are trying to understand the fundamental health of the garden, not control it. And that brings us right back to COVID. The pandemic and the absolutely massive government response that came with it became this giant real-world stress test for both of these philosophies. The mechanics came out full force, right? Trillions in stimulus spending. And the gardeners were watching from the sidelines, really worried that all this intervention might permanently wreck the underlying ecosystem. Which led to the biggest question of all. After all that aggressive intervention, after a shock of historic size, was the fundamental DNA of the economy, the garden itself, permanently broken? Did the mechanic, in a rush to fix things, end up trampling all the flower beds? So, was the garden trampled? Well, this data gives us a really fascinating clue. What you're looking at here are estimates of that gardener's metric, that natural rate of interest, R star. Think of it like the economy's natural resting heart rate. Now, you can see it was trending down for years, right? It hit 0.9% right before the pandemic. But here's the real kicker. After the biggest economic shock in a century and trillions in intervention, look at that number in 2022. It barely budged. It landed at 0.8%. So what on earth does that mean? Well, it suggests that the deep underlying structure of the economy, the garden, if you will, was way more resilient than a lot of people were afraid of. Despite the insane shock and the unprecedented response, the deep roots of the system held firm. And that's a pretty powerful point for Hayek's side of the argument, that the economy is a remarkably tough, self-regulating system. But hold on, this doesn't mean the debate is over. Oh, not even close. What this whole episode really shows us is that the tension between these two worldviews isn't some problem we're ever going to solve. It's a permanent feature. It's the central, defining drama of modern economics. So it's not really about one side being right and the other being wrong. It's about this constant back and forth between direct intervention versus trusting free markets. It's top-down planning versus that organic, spontaneous order. It's always a question of, do we need to fix the machine or do we just need to tend the garden? And look, this is not just some dusty academic debate. The philosophy that wins out in the halls of power has a direct impact on your life. We're talking about the interest rates on your car loan or your mortgage, the amount of government spending on things we all use, and really, the overall stability of your financial future. This stuff really, truly matters. Which, of course, leaves us with that final nagging question. Because we know another crisis is coming. It's not a matter of if, but when. And when it arrives, who are we going to need? Will we need the bold, decisive action of a mechanic? Or will we need the patient, humble wisdom of a gardener?